I'm Corbett Wall with DVAuction, here with your feeder flash for Monday, April the 29th, brought to you in part by Macrocin by Bimeda. Macrocin is a straight shooting tulathromycin injection, basically a generic Draxin. To see how Macrocin compares in a big trial against some of the bigger name products, go to macrocin.com. Also, Joplin Regional Stockyards, more moderate run. We're just running low on available cattle to sell, guys. Going to have 5,000 head, which is a pretty light run for them. Not going to start till 8 o'clock in the morning. But as you're thinking about marketing your cattle that you've got turned out here this summer, check out the marketing options that Joplin Regional Stockyards has. Be thinking about that big bang primetime livestock video sale that they're going to have in Pittsburgh, Kansas, right before the 4th of July. That thing gets bigger every year, and it is consistently one of the top video sales of the summer there. Be thinking about that, guys, and get a hold of your representative there at JRS. We knew it was coming. Not the tornadoes that we had and the bad storms that harassed the Midwest over the weekend, and we feel for those people and any feeder flash gang members or anybody that knows anybody, has friends or family that's been adversely affected by those tornadoes. We're thinking about them. We did have some very beneficial moisture fall across corn country, cattle country, grazing country all over. Even Sunday night it was down into Kansas or Oklahoma where they had some bad tornadoes, but a lot of rain too, and even into North Texas. But we didn't know that was coming. But what we knew was coming is we knew this mandatory ID was coming. I told you guys about it. I devoted several feeder flashes to it. Of course, we had a big talk about it back whenever NCBA was having their big convention there in Florida, and a lot of you people got really excited about it, and there was a big grassroots outpouring of negativity on it, against it, and actually caused some of our big outfits, our big cattle groups, to not support it or not make policy to come out and support mandatory ID. Now, they did come in and say that they supported EID tagging, but did not come out in support of mandatory ID. But I told you back then that they were going to cram it down our throats whether we wanted it or not. And even though the big establishment groups in the cattle business, for the most part, and most of your state organizations did not support it. Even though they did not and did not make policy for it, they still crammed it down our throats, and by they I mean USDA. Of all the things that are screwed up in this country and in this world right now, it's hard to believe that the federal government has enough time to put restrictions on our cattle business when they don't even have restrictions against people from every corner of this globe, just waltzing right across the border on the southern side. We don't even know who they are, what they like, or what their intentions are. It's unbelievable. But it happened last Friday, guys. The USDA, Tom Vilsack, our fearless secretary there that works for every kind of administration that comes along, he went ahead and just made it a law, or made it a rule that's going to become mandatory in 6 months here, right after it gets posted on the Federal Registry. So that's fixing to happen. So basically, you've got 6 months now. It's not on all cattle, and that's what we were really up in arms about whenever we had the big grassroots uprising there, and I was really freaking out about that. But I don't even like what they put in, but they're doing it under disease traceability flagship, and so that's what they're and especially with this bird flu that come through, And I don't know who decided to make a big deal out of the bird flu, but it did what it was supposed to do. The bird flu. We had some sick cows. I don't even know if we had any dead cows. They were all dairy cows. We had one worker that we found out later was drinking the milk from a diseased cow, and it wasn't pasteurized, and he got a runny eye over the deal. And now we've got all this new restrictions on our cattle, and it's not just the dairy cattle, but they did come in and put restrictions on transporting dairy cattle. So now you got to have all kinds of tests, and it's not just a simple blood test that we're used to doing. It's a milk test. You got to milk them out a little bit to do that, to cross state lines, and there's all kinds of different rules about. Some of them are free of it, like bangs or whatever, and maybe they won't have to be under such tough restrictions as ones that are. But anyways, it's going to be really tough for people, if they're having a big dispersal at a dairy or something. It's going to be really, really tough for them to get the dairy cows going to their new homes. But they don't move dairy cows around all that much. They mostly go to slaughter after they stop producing, so that's not a deal. But there has been some uncertainty, and there's been some confusion on whether or not you can take a dairy cow from the dairy, and whether you're going across state lines or whatever you're doing. I know if you're going to a slaughterhouse or a plant, you don't have to have them tested. But there's been some uncertainty on whether or not you have to have them tested to go to a sale barn. Now, if that's true, that ain't fair. And that dairyman's got his beef, what they call them, the cows that they're ready to send to town, those beef cows they call them, which are dairy cows. He should be able to take those to a competitive auction market to sell those and not have to go through a whole bunch more rigmarole. There's a lot of times that cows go into a slaughter auction and they're just slaughter only. They're marked slaughter only, and everybody understands that now. Surely that's going to be the way, but I've talked to some sale barn owners that didn't think it was, so we're going to keep tabs on that. But what USDA come down on Friday is they have said that within 6 months, all sexually intact cattle, I mean all cattle, all beef cattle, every kind of cattle, are going to have to be mandatory ID'd, EID tagged. It has to be a visible tag and electronically visible tag, and it's going to be on all cattle, basically all breeding cattle. So our calves and yearlings are okay. Even if, we had some steers that had some age on it, wouldn't be that big deal. They wouldn't be sexually intact. Or, we may end up doing more on spayed heifers. I don't know. I don't think they'll probably get that close to it. But basically, stocker cattle and feeder cattle are not included in this. But all breeding stock of all beef breeds. Of course, dairy cattle have always had to have it, even the steers, the Holstein steers. All cattle that's been imported, they've already had to have had it. But it's also going to include all cattle that are for rodeo, recreation, or exhibition. So think about that a little bit. But you're going to have them tagged, guys. EID tagged. And for a lot of people, it's not going to be that big a deal. Especially if you've got a big established ranch that's been inherited down several generations, and you've got cornerstone facilities, and you've got equipment, and you've got help, and a lot of them are doing it already, and it's not going to be a big deal for them at all. The thing that I hate, that it is going to be a big deal for that older, and you can't really call him a rancher, but that older cattleman that's got, maybe 100 cows on 4 different places. and he doesn't have any facilities at any of the places. He's got a handful of wore out panels. He doesn't have any help. It's going to be very difficult for him, and he moves the cows around a lot in different areas because he's got a little lease place over here and a little lease place over there and another lease place over here. He doesn't have big tracts of land that never leave the place until he ships the calves. It's going to be tough on him. It's going to drive a lot of them out. Some of them will look up and say, hey, you know, the market's good on all classes, I'm just going to cash out. And there won't be near as many of those producers to come back in behind them. I don't like things that run producers out of our industry. It's going to be tough on the late 20s or 30-year-old guy that's trying to get a cattle operation put together, and the only way he can do it is through some lease places, doesn't have any facilities, doesn't have any collateral, doesn't have a big enough line of credit to do what he wants to, and doesn't have any help. I was that guy 20 years ago. But it's going to be tough on some people, and it's like everything else. The haves will have more, and the have-nots will probably find something else to do. But it's nice to know that the federal government has time to get something like that pushed through on us when I guess there's just not enough other things going on that they need to pay attention to. But let's talk about your board for last week. April live cattle futures, Monday was up 235, Tuesday was down 47, Wednesday was down $1.25, Thursday was up $1.85, and Friday was up 72 cents. With April live cattle contracts, which that we're done now with those, or will be here, 184.67. That was up 320 for the week, so big gains. June was up 290 for the week at 178.57. Now we're going to start talking about May feeder cattle now, because April went off the board at exactly what our latest CME cash feeder cattle index was. I told you they will come together. They absolutely do. But that was at 245.53. Excuse me. But May feeder cattle on Monday of last week were up 317. Tuesday was up 87. Wednesday backed off $1.95. And Thursday up 215. Friday up another 245. Huge gains on your feeder cattle board. May feeder cattle ended the week at 248.70, up 670 for the week. August ended the week at 260.55. August is probably our most important feeder cattle contract month if you put any importance on those CME feeder cattle contracts at all. August is probably our most important, and April is usually the most important live cattle contract there. But big gains there, and even though we saw some big gains on your feeder board, which is very, very volatile, the cattle boards don't really seem that top heavy right now. They've been through a lot of stuff, and they've stayed pretty good, guys. Your grains, corn ended the week May contract 440. That was up 6.5 cents a bushel. Soybeans ended the week at 11.59.5. That was up 9 cents a bushel. And the ever volatile Kansas City hard red winter wheat for May ended the week at 646.25, up 64.75 cents a bushel. Wow. Fat cattle trade up through Thursday of last week, we had sold 68,200 head. The week before that, through Thursday, we had sold 2,600 head. So we sold over 65,000 head more negotiated last week up through Thursday than we did the previous week, because it would just happen, and the Southern Plains has got egg on their face because they decided to trade on Wednesday when there was some swirlings about more bird flu fiasco stuff, and the board was down, and they traded mostly steady. The Northern Plains, they stuck their heels in the ground. They used their negotiating skills, and they sold their cattle better. So up through Thursday of last week, we sold cattle in the 5 area feeding region, negotiated from 181 to 187. That was steady to $2 higher for the most part. Weighted average was 184 thereabouts, which is about a buck better than it was last week. With the Southern Plains trading steady, the Northern Plains gained ground and still got that weighted average up a buck higher or more. Well, dress trade from 292 to 303. The dress trade was not even tested the previous week because there was so few sales up through Thursday. Weighted average was around 294 and a half, which is about $2 higher than last week. So the Northern Plains got with it, guys. They did a good job. Just good to see negotiation happen, and especially when you've got the leverage on them. You got to use it, guys. For the most part, the Northern Plains last week sold their fat cattle, started out 184, then 185, and then 186. Mostly 185, 186 late. That was $2 to $3 higher. Dress sales were 292 to 295. Heavy on the 295 late. That was $3 higher. Southern Plains traded mostly early or Wednesday and mostly steady at 182. There was a little bit of 184 in Kansas late, but that would be northern Kansas and didn't really make an effect on the Southern Plains weighted average. But on Friday we sold some more cattle. Iowa sold 2,100. They sold 21,700 for the week. On Friday they sold them from 185 to 187 and dressed from 294 to 295. Nebraska sold 2,300 on Friday, a little over 28,000 for the week. Live sales on Friday 185 to 187 and dressed at 294. Like I said, Kansas sold 500 head on Friday, but they sold 13,600 for the week. The Friday sale was 184, and it was mostly on mixed bag cattle, fins of steers and heifers mixed, which usually sell at a discount, but they brought 184. Texas didn't sell any cattle on Friday, didn't get to take advantage of any of the higher market or higher board later in the week, and any of the higher fat cattle trade further north. But 9,700 for the week. Box beef cutout values. Your weighted average on all of last week's choice cuts was 296.63. That was down 81 cents from the previous week's weighted average. Your late Friday sales were down about 50 cents from that. They were up about 50 cents from that at 297.14. Excuse me there. Your select sales, weighted average on all of last week's sales, 290.68. That was 31 cents lower than the previous week's weighted average on select cuts. Your late Friday sales of select were about $2 lower than that weighted average at 288.72. All that happened with a choice select spread on the weighted average of 595 and 644 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. Your slaughter, 613,000, which is not great, but it's over 600. Pretty good, and we're happy with that. And that even happened with such a short availability of cows and bulls that they're just barely being able to run. And then we had the one given plant that was dark last Monday because they had that fire in the rendering area, and then they recovered from that very fast and came right back on Tuesday, and then had a normal slaughter throughout then. But 613,000 last week of harvest was 7,000 less than the previous week, 14,000 less than the same week a year ago. Let's talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on DVAuction ended the week at 247.03. That was $4.16 higher than it ended the previous week. Big gains, guys, on cattle going right into the feedlot, and they tell us that our feedlots are filled or plumb full to the brim, but they're still buying these cattle. But likely some of that gain was due to some 7-weight cattle that's indeed going to be turned out, and they got thrown in that index, and they did on the CME cash feeder cattle index too. I told you earlier the latest available on it was 245.53, and it'll be going up after we get that late week information in it here early this week. Talk about your cash trends last week and your sale barns. Feeders going right in the feedlot $4 to $8 higher. Your new crop calves bounced back $2 to $5 higher on those, with a lot of activity stirring. And your stockers, your true stockers, your calf weight yearlings, and your really hard wintered cattle, weighing all the way up to 750 pounds if they had the condition to be turned out, they sold $5 to $8 higher where they were available and where they were most demanded, which was up in the northern plains for the most part. Now talk about your big sales. Your National Beef Wire stick-out sale of the day for late last week and over the weekend was Burwell Livestock Market in Burwell, Nebraska. Long-time DVAuction broadcaster there, and one of the really premium sales up there in that part of the Sand Hills of Nebraska. 3,300 head for them. It was mostly fancy calves. Look at this automated market report from Cattle Market Central, and you see the best tested weights were your calf weights there. 537 head of 5 weights in Burwell, average 556 pounds, with a weighted average price on over 500 of them of $340.05, with an average weight over 5.5. Wow! How about 310 head of 6 weight steers in Burwell? They average 658 at $311.91 on the weighted average. Oh my gosh! Look at the heifers. 344 head, and there was more heifers being sold. 344 head of the 4-weight heifer calves averaged 456 at $335. There were 570 head of 5-weight heifers averaged 543 at $308.56, and 443 head of 6-weight heifers, Burwell, Nebraska, weighted average weight 634, weighted average price $281.39. Going to give you some individual quotes from all around. How about Tri-State Livestock, Abington, Virginia? On Friday, they sell 165 steers way out in Virginia, weigh 910 pounds and bring 227. How about Burke Livestock in South Dakota? They sell 63 big steers, weigh 1059 and bring 226.75. Oh my goodness. But the most impressive quote that I saw anywhere late last week or over the weekend, your Macrocin No BS top quote for the day, come out of Fort Pierre Livestock Auction, Fort Pierre, South Dakota. It was 70 steers, weighed 782. That's pretty close to 800 pounds, guys. Bring 277. And that's your feeder flash for Monday.